Hi guys, this is Dustin Thickman, Mr. Too Blessed to Be Stressed. And today I have with me Mr. Tom Grinser. I actually sent you guys an email probably the other day and just kind of told you about a little bit about his story and about his background and just gave you a little bit of a teaser. But Tom has a pretty compelling story and it's pretty interesting how we met. Actually, I was talking to a friend the other day and she was letting me know how she was going to a funeral and we were talking about death and just different things that people deal with. And she was explaining how her uncle, who was the one who was dying, had Alzheimer's, and that she wasn't sure how he was all there at the end, and it was just kind of a blessing for him to to kind of get past and not have to suffer with that anymore. But it got me to thinking about like my faith. And you guys have probably heard me say before that I'm a Christian and I do believe in God, but like I kind of wondered about what happens when people kind of lose their mind when they have Alzheimer's and they get to that point where it's like you don't know if they're really there anymore. It's like what happens to their faith at that point. So it got me thinking. Where do people go when they search for answers, right? I probably should say the Bible as a Christian, but honestly they go to Google. And I went to Google and I actually searched people with Alzheimer's being saved, just kind of out of curiosity, see what kind of stuff I could find. And I came across an article by Tom, and it's kind of funny. The name of the article was "How Alzheimer's Saved Me from Wage Slavery," and it kind of just struck me. And I was really curious. Okay, what is this guy talking about? So I went through and I started reading about Tom and reading his article, and he was saying how he was stuck in a cubicle, but he really should have been at home, taking care of his mom and different stuff. I don't want to give it too much away, but he was going through a lot, and it amazed me reading his story and going through the whole thing. And then at the end, just seeing how this dude had came out on the other side and had just basically, escaped from that cubicle and made his life what he wanted it to be, and actually had that time, that he wanted back. And it's like Tom's journey from the cubicle zombie to the work-at-home entrepreneur. It's kind of like it's an emotional story. I'm gonna let Tom share most of it for you. I got him right here on the Skype with me. I don't want to give away too many details, but I just want you guys to remember something as you sit here and listen to Tom. As you think about your own life and the people and the things in your life that are important to you, I want you to think about Tom, because when action and drive are deep rooted in your passion, that passion gets close to your heart. That's when amazing things starts to happen. When you actually have that drive and that you can actually harness that and use it to get where you want to be in life. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today, and just how Tom kind of got to where he wanted to be in life and where he needed to be, honestly, for his family.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Tom Grenser. Like I said, it rhymes with dispenser. It's a silly thing to say, but it's helped me a lot of times with people remembering how to pronounce it. But I'm from Waterville, Maine, and I'm 46 years old. And I right now basically a journalist or blogger or whatever you want to call it. So and I love whitewater kayaking, and married to a beautiful wife, Kathy, and we have a baby boy, Maddox, who's 10 months old.
So yeah, guys. So Tom is a writer. As you heard him say, he he blogs and stuff, and there was a lot more he did, I guess, in the beginning just to kind of get started. He kind of had to reach out there and get out there and try to make a name for himself. But he's a man who's determined to be there for his family, and he basically set out a plan to do it. Like I said, Tom, before, I appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to talk to me. I'm sure my viewers and my readers appreciate it too. It took a bit of time for us to get this whole schedule, with the kayaking and stuff that you're doing. I know you're a really busy guy, so I appreciate it, man. So Tom is a guy who makes time for his family and for fun. I really respect that. So I just want to make sure we respect his time, and I really let him know I appreciate it. So, okay, Tom, I'm going to let you take the floor here, buddy. Just go ahead and take as much time as you need, and just go ahead and tell the viewers your story.
So thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time as well. And yeah, so my story, just to get right into it, it was several years ago, I think 2002, and I was working in a cubicle. I was working for a company that made infomercials, and it was the schedule, working in a cubicle plus being stuck in traffic a couple hours a day was kind of tight. And then, of course, on weekends, you have one day when you're doing your errands, and then one day you basically have to yourself, which is just really tough, especially because my mom had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I knew from talking to friends that she didn't have a ton of time left where she was going to be herself. And yet here I was stuck. I was only an hour away, but that hour was a long time because I was in the cubicle so much and stuck in traffic so much that I could get up there for basically an afternoon a week, if that, and there was no option for me to move back to that town that they lived in, that my parents lived in, because there were just no jobs in that town. So here I was, stuck an hour away, stuck in the cubicle a lot, stuck in traffic a lot, wishing I could be there to at least say goodbye to my mom properly. Not just say goodbye, but be there, here or there for dinner, or just to be around my mom and to help my dad, because the primary caregiver with Alzheimer's disease often dies first because they're so overstressed and so overworked. And I wanted to be able to be there to give my dad a little break and not have him work himself to death, basically. And I couldn't do that because I was trapped. And so what I could do was, I just realized one morning I was driving to work, and I always left, I don't know, 10 minutes before I had to be at work, or 20 minutes before I had to be at work, and then I was stuck in traffic for a long time, and then I was late, and I spent about an hour every morning in traffic, and it suddenly hit me, well, if I left an hour early, it would only take me 10 minutes to get to work, and then I'm at work an hour early, and I don't have anything to do, but at least I'm not sitting in traffic. Everybody was angry. I noticed that about this traffic drive, is everybody was mad, and they're honking their horns, and people are cutting you off, and I thought, well, let me try one morning just driving to work an hour early. Everybody was pleasant. There was no traffic. I got there in 10 minutes. And then I showed up an hour early, but still I didn't have to be stuck in traffic for an hour. So what do you do with that extra hour? Well, I didn't know what to do. I just started journaling. I brought a notebook with me, and I didn't want to go into the office, but I would sit looking out over Casco Bay in Portland, Maine, and I would watch, the sun was basically already up, but I'd kind of watch it rising more, and I would journal about what am I going to do, what do I like, what do I not like, what am I angry about, what do I want more of in my life, what do I want less of in my life. And the recurring theme was, I hate my job. I hate my job. I hate my job. I hate this cubicle. I hate driving so much. I hate going into work when it's dark and then coming out when it's dark. And especially in the winter in Maine, you don't get a lot of daylight. And that really frustrated me. And the thing that I hated the most was, my mom is dying. She's got Alzheimer's disease. She's going away bit by bit, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I started thinking about how, as Americans, there's this people, I'm not the one who thought this up, but there's people pass this idea around of, we're kind of like Eskimos that put their elderly out on an ice floe and push them off and just watch them disappear. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, that's kind of accurate. I can't do anything about my mom. She's dying. I can't even go there and be around her. I just have to kind of let her go and not think about it. And that was driving me crazy. And so the more I journaled, there was no solution and there was no quest for a solution. I was just griping in the journal every day. I can't stand this situation. This is awful. I hate that this is happening. And it got to the point where it was weeks, literally weeks, when I would do this every morning, and I would fill pages in this journal and just complain and complain and complain. And I didn't mind that. It was making me feel good to be able to at least complain about it, that I wasn't just having to suck it up and not think about it. So to at least get it off my chest. Well, then I started actually, at some point, just kind of ideas started popping into my head. Like, well, what if, could I get a job up in Waterville where my mom lives? No, there's no jobs up there. Well, is there anything I could do? And I started realizing I have a lot of video production skills that I got from, I was a whitewater videographer, and that's, that pays no money at all, but I had some skills from that. So I started thinking, well, maybe I could, when I'm at home at night, I could Google and find people who are doing video production, and I could call them in the morning when I'm sitting in my car, and I could ask them for a job. So I started doing that. I must have called 50 different places, and they all said, no, the economy's terrible, we're not hiring, I'm a one-man show, blah, 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 blah. So, but I kept calling and I kept calling because I had nothing else to do. I'm stuck in my car in the morning. And finally I got through to this one guy. I think it must have been like number 47 or number 50 or something like that. And he said, look, if you've got skills, why don't you hang out a shingle online like I did? That's all I did. He said, just do that. So I said, okay. And I made a cheap website that was basically just a business card on the internet. And I said, look, I've got video skills, and here's what I'm going to try to, I'll do work for you. Well, I booked 3 weddings that summer, and that was enough to buy a camera. And I quit the job. I quit the cubicle job. I shot those 3 weddings, and I did some menial labor on the side, just to make enough to pay my bills. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities then, so it was kind of a Hail Mary, but I wasn't that worried. And I ended up the next winter booking 12 weddings and pulling in about $4,800 in advance payments or retainers for those weddings, which to me back then was a decent amount of money. And then from there, my video production business took off. I started getting corporate clients. The best side effect of all that was I was able to live wherever I wanted to. So I moved back up near my parents, and I was able to spend one day a week, a full day a week with my parents, give my dad a break. He could go out of the house and do stuff, hang out with my mom, take her out to lunch, take her on walks. And I didn't have a ton of time because what happened was, surprisingly, not surprisingly, probably to most people, when you start your own business, you realize that the more you work, the more money you make. And so I ended up working a lot of hours, even though I was spending more time with my mom. It wasn't because I was working less. It was because I lived closer to her, because I could work from home. I didn't have to be in that city with that cubicle where that job was. I could live wherever I wanted to. So I was actually working more hours at first, but I was closer to my parents, and I could go over there at night for dinner, and I could go over there one day a week for a full day, and so I was around them a lot more. Well, I ended up realizing that I didn't want to work that much and cutting back my hours, valuing my time a bit more, and I ended up making that a goal and ended up working 20 hours a week only. And ever since then, that's all I've ever worked. Well, I can't say that. There's sometimes when I put in a little extra, but for the most part, I try to keep to that. Now, I was able to spend more time with my mom. Eventually, Alzheimer's disease took her life, as it does pretty much anybody that gets it. And that was obviously a very tough time. I went through a lot of hard times through that time. But then, later on, years later, my dad also got sick. He had a massive stroke. Well, at that point, I only worked 20 hours a week. I was making great money with this great video production business I had built. I was living right near him. I was able to go and stay in his hospital room and give him basically double the amount of rehab hours he had per day when I was teaching him stuff, how to read a clock again, or taking walks with him, or doing motor skills work with him, because the rehab people said the more rehab he gets, the quicker he's going to recover. So I said, great, I'll double it. Everything you guys will do, I'll do it, but I'll give him extra hours every day. And he would joke and call me a taskmaster. But within a couple of months after him having this massive stroke where he couldn't walk and he couldn't talk, he was not only back on his feet, not only living back at home, but he was doing his own shopping. He was able to drive a car again. I took him, we had driver's ed lessons. He got to the point where he could drive. He drove his car from Maine to Florida and went on a 2-week trip and visited friends. He went out west. He flew out west, but he drove around out there and lived out there for months. Ended up having more strokes and going back in the hospital. He had a condition where he had about 12 strokes during that year, and it ended up taking his life. But during that year, the last few months of his life, I spent working exclusively in his hospital room 5 days a week, to the point where the nurses were saying, go home, do something, you're spending too much time here. And I was like, hey, I'd be in a cubicle 5 days a week. But instead, I'm 5 days a week in my dad's hospital room, and I'm working in his nursing home room. I'm working here, but I can advocate for him. I can be with him. If his muscles cramp, I can massage his muscles. And you couldn't pry that experience away from me. Like, that was probably one of the best experiences of my life. That I feel so good that I was able to do that with my dad, and he had been my hero my whole life, and now he was becoming my friend, and I was there for him, and it was a great gift to be able to do that for him. And now, years later, I've got a wife and a son of my own. Because of that experience, I still work from home. I decided, well, I can work from anywhere. I'm going to move. I don't want to live in Maine after my parents had died. So my wife and I moved to West Virginia. We both are avid about whitewater. This is the best whitewater on the planet, well, in the country anyway. And we live right near it, and we do lots of whitewater, and we have a great circle of friends. It's a great outdoor community. I still work from home. She's a stay-at-home mom. We have a son, and I get to be at home, and I get to be with my almost 10 months old son now a lot. If Kathy's in the other room, and she'll say, oh my gosh, he's pulling himself up, and I'll get up and run from the computer and go look, and there he is pulling himself up, and I got to see that. Or I just get to come out of the office now and then, and he laughs when he sees me and he smiles, and I get to pick him up and hold him, and then it's okay, buddy, I got to put you back down. I got to go back to work. But that's basically the story. My business didn't end up following me to West Virginia like I had hoped it would. My video production business, there were some hiccups there. I wanted to kind of keep that business, and I couldn't, and move down here. But I really wanted to move down here. I ended up finding I knew I could make a living online already, so I shifted careers after a few years down here of living on savings. I ended up getting into blogging and writing online, and I've always been a writer. I've always been avid with that, and that has transitioned into something I'm not making as much money as I was with my video production business up in Maine, but I'm making a decent enough living where my wife is able to be a stay-at-home mom. We own our house. We're able to raise this boy, and yeah, it's been a great experience. It was a horrible experience having both of my parents die, but that happens to everybody eventually if they live long enough. And I feel very, very blessed that I was able to kind of get the tap on the shoulder from that journaling and those mornings spent on Casco Bay thinking, what sucks about this and what can I do about it? And here I am. I wouldn't trade it really.
Yeah, so Tom, it's like it's this whole thing that people really don't think about is going into they go about their days and go about their lives not really thinking about the future too much. They kind of like live weekend to weekend, live paycheck to paycheck, and just go about their day, and they really don't have any sort of plans or internal thoughts outside of the now and the here and now. They don't really think about what their life could be. They just accept what their life is. So well, the question I wanted to ask you was, it's apparent in your writings that your feelings, talking to yourself and like having those feelings kind of fleshed out, written down, having those internal conversations really helped you to, allowed your mind to like present solutions to yourself. The whole like, you kind of brought up the fact that had some video skills that you didn't really, do anything with, but you could. Do you feel like that everyone should like journal or maybe at least have those internal conversations with themselves frequently, and like kind of like, really figure out what they want?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone should journal because I feel like I'm going to turn this down again. I feel like not everybody likes it, but I like it. I kind of tend to be a little bit of a blabbermouth, so if nobody wants, I don't want to subject people to that all the time. So journaling is a great way for me to do that without boring anyone. But it's certainly, I think it would help. Some people don't like to journal, but you pointed out you're a Christian. Prayer, I mean, and maybe prayer of kind of just telling God every day, here's what I'm going through. That's kind of what I was doing. I was journaling. I was writing out, here's what I'm going through. Here's what I'm going through. I hate it. I would say if you can journal, definitely do it. And I think the value in it is in creative dissatisfaction. I've heard that term before. Creative dissatisfaction with the status quo. I don't like here's the things I don't like. Here's the things I do like. Here's the things I want less of in my life. Here's the things I want more of in my life. Looking back on it, it was like, oh, that's great. That was perfect. It resulted in all these solutions. But I wasn't going for that. I was just really wanted to be able to get it off my chest. And after every day of doing the same, getting the same thing off my chest, things started to pop in on their own where there was no stress. I guess I would just say, if you want to journal, awesome. If you want to pray, awesome. If you want to just go for long walks and think about your situation, great. But the key thing for me is don't be stressed out about it. Don't try to force anything into happening. Just kind of griping almost or being happy about things that you're happy about and upset about things that you're upset about.
Just kind of being honest with yourself about your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know like if there was any sort of like I guess internal motivation beyond that, I guess that kind of pushed you into the right direction. It's just really, I guess, yourself and your thoughts just kind of coming in there and push you in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah, I've read a lot of self-help stuff over the years, and probably all that stuff echoes back. Like I read Way of the Peaceful Warrior is a really good book. Have you read that? Yeah, I love that book, and I've read a bunch of self-help stuff, but I feel like at the time I wasn't really reading any of that stuff. I was just kind of griping, but I just think I do admire people who can keep going no matter what, and I do think of like certain movies like Castaway is a great movie where it's a movie with a great message, right? Where the guy at the end, Tom Hanks's character says, you just have to keep going no matter what because you never know what's going to wash up. And when I saw that movie after I had this whole experience, and I remember thinking when I saw it, like, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, you just have to keep going because everything might suck. And it did. In that time when I was journaling in the car, everything sucked. I mean, everything sucked. But I would keep journaling, and I would keep thinking, like, I don't know, something good might be around the corner. And also my dad, you mentioned that you're a Christian. My dad, about a year before he died, I interviewed him on camera, and I asked him, "Are you happy?" And he said, "Yes." He didn't even hesitate. And this is a guy who's 79 years old at the time, and he's lost his wife, he's lost 2 children, he's lost. He came from a family of 12, and most of them were gone. His parents were gone, most of his brothers and sisters, and a lot of friends had died. And I pointed that out to him. I said, "How the heck are you happy?" And he said, "Well," he said, I do a lot of things there's a lot of things that I really like to do, and I spend most of my time doing those. Beyond that, I don't think about stuff that makes me unhappy." And he said, "I have a very strong faith." And so I've kind of tried to take that to heart and tried to follow in his footsteps as best I can.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, just like on the surface, just me listening to you, that even though there was a lot of bad junk happening, like, to you at the time, you felt like you were in like a bad place where you didn't want to be at, that you still had that little thing to hold on to, which is being with your parents, that kind of, like, I guess, kept you focused onto that. Because honestly, with me, it seems like there's always got to be something I have to be focused on. Because if I'm always focused on the crap, if I'm always focused on the bad stuff, then it's like you always stay in that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really get out of it if you always focus on that. So, like, it seems to me that you at least had that like kind of, glimmer of hope, that little place that you wanted to be at, that you at least have something, like a direction to go into, like, I want to be there, not here. How do I get there? So, I don't know, maybe it was more of a subconscious thing. Maybe it just kind of like happened.
I think it was more subconscious.
Yeah.
I think I did have, yearnings, and I had things I wanted to do, but there was kind of a moment when it kind of slapped me in the face that, man, I'm whining an awful lot. And it was like, well, is there anything I could actually do about this? That kind of jumped out at that thought is a positive thought that jumped out at one point, like, this is a pile of negative stuff every single day that I'm doing. Is there anything I can do? And I think it took all that negativity for that long, though, to finally kind of shove me over the dike or whatever, to get me beyond the berm that was keeping me. I was smacking into the same thing every day, and it built up enough frustration that I finally started asking, well, what can I do about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you made that decision, like, to leave your job, did you feel like your mental shift kind of happened then, maybe a little bit more?
It was, and it was kind of pushed on me as well, because at the same time all this was going on, when I was in that cubicle job, my boss, it was a unique situation where when I got hired, my boss said, I want you to figure out what's wrong with our business and why it isn't working. And we were making infomercials, TV infomercials. So I did this big study where I watched all of their previous infomercials, and I figured out the ones that were working and the ones that didn't. And I came up with all these ideas I figured out pretty much, here's why your business isn't working. And I told him, and he said, don't just tell me, make a report. So I made a report, and I gave it to him. He said, don't just give it to me, present it in a meeting. So I called a meeting, and I gave a presentation, and the whole meeting he sat there eating a sandwich, and he never once looked up from his sandwich. And when it finished, I just kind of stood there looking around, and he was still looking at the table, and everybody else was looking at me, and I felt like a fool. And I said, well, what do you think? And he said, I understand what you're saying, but he didn't say this in so many words, but he basically said, but we're not going to change the way we do things. And at that point, I kind of felt useless, and I kind of threw up my hands and said, well, I don't want to be here anymore.
Well, it's like, I don't know, I've read a lot of stuff, people talking about, like, not having a plan B, like, like to kind of like force yourself to do it. So I guess by quitting your job, you kind of gave yourself not that income to fall on, so you had to make your own.
Yeah, there was an element of burning my ships in that for sure. But if I had to do that right now, I think I would still probably do it, but I think I would spend a lot more time and thought on building up a safety net first.
So you kind of answered this a little bit already, but do you have certain books that you read, or certain speakers that you listen to on a regular basis, maybe, or just even once in a while when you need like a little bit of boost, to keep you going? Do you have anything really that you go to?
There was a time when I was younger when I was devouring self-help books. But I don't really do that so much anymore, and I certainly am not happy all the time, and I don't feel like I've arrived or anything. I feel like there's still a lot of that element of there's a lot of days when I'm like nothing works and everything's a dud and everything I'm trying seems to be falling apart. I feel like people who are the happiest are the people who, whether everything crashes down or everything seems to be going great, they just kind of keep going with the plan and they just keep working at it. But anyway, I read some Tony Robbins when I was younger and really enjoyed that, and haven't really read a ton. I read Napoleon Hill. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
I read him when this was all back when I was like in my late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
I think back then I was more kind of thinking like, well, how do I figure this stuff out? There's no instruction manual for like, here I am, I'm just a person, I'm a young guy, I'm on my own. I don't know how anything works or how anything is supposed to work. And they put you through school and you have math and you have science and you have language and you have all these things that you learn, but there's no class like here's how you live a life. And maybe that's what religion is supposed to be. And I just felt kind of lost, like I don't know what to do. Like that nobody has sat me down. I have my parents to draw on as great examples. You know, my dad was a veterinarian. My mom was a nurse, a school nurse. They were both former Air Force people. They had a big family. They'd gone through hardships. They were great role models. But there was nobody ever sat me down and was like, here are the steps that you should follow to have a great life. And so I guess I was reading those things voraciously because I was like, I don't know what to do. My life is going by and I don't know how to react to it.
I appreciate you coming and sharing. I found your story just to be so inspirational, motivational. I hope that my readers will appreciate it and just kind of use you as inspiration to keep going and kind of reaching for what they really want in life. Because I just don't want other people to be stuck in a job that they hate or stuck in a cubicle and missing these moments with their family that there are only so many of. We only have so much time with kids when they're little and parents when they're around. So I appreciate you kind of giving us that inspiration and readers that inspiration to kind of keep going and pushing forward.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tom.